You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you follow this podcast on all platforms, as well as follow this YouTube channel live from Canes County. It is game week. Finally, we are here. And today I've got Jason Higdon joining me from 1st and 10 Florida, also part of the as far as the internet's concerned. But Jason, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Oh, Jason, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just the internet seems to be going in and out.
All right, we'll see if we can keep going here.
Okay.
With the internet issues, yeah, it's game week and it's Canes, it's the Gators. I think it's one of the best rivalries in college football, and they finally will kick it off Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on ABC. Just first off, your thoughts on this rivalry, and just how happy are you to see these two teams face off on Saturday?
I think I'm like, the rest of the state of Florida, basically just excited that college football is here. Last week was a teaser, watching Florida State play, I'm sure all fan bases from both sides love the outcome of that game, but I think there's just so much excitement and, so many questions surrounding on Florida's side of things for this game. The anticipation and the buildup is just, it's probably the biggest game in the last 5-6 years in the Swamp, and it's the home opener. I mean, you can't ask for much more.
Absolutely. I mean, the Hurricanes fans are really excited to really kind of kick things off. They're ranked number 19 in the nation, and a lot of hype surrounding this team. And we'll talk a little bit more about, just what Florida has to offer. This is basically our scouting the opponent episode of the Storm Tracker podcast. Glad that this series is back. So we'll learn a lot about the Gators from Jason. They've got new secondary, new strength and conditioning coaches. Just what we'll find out about the offense and the defense as well. But Jason, I just kind of want to know what the feel is around the program right now. There's a lot of, pressure on Billy Napier to really kind of produce. And the Gators got a tough schedule, if not the toughest in all of college football. Maybe predict the Gators to finish maybe in the middle or maybe the lower half of the SEC. So how hot is this hot seat for Billy Napier? And just what's the feeling around the Florida Gators right now?
Well, I think there's so much anticipation just, again, around the start of the actual season. I mean, you know how the fans are. The season hasn't started. Everybody's undefeated. Everybody's going to make the playoffs. No one's going to lose the game. So there's a lot of anticipation just to get to Saturday and have the actual kickoff. This team, there's a lot of question marks surrounding the team. Florida's coming off 3 losing seasons in a row. Coach Mullen lost his last year, 2 losing seasons to start the Billy Napier era. So I think there's a lot of pressure within the organization to win and win now. So we've seen a lot of changes with a new secondary coach, with Will Harris, a new D-line coach, Gerald Chatham. Those guys so far, I've heard nothing but rave reviews about those guys. On top of that, the strength and conditioning was an issue the last couple of years. Now they got a group of people in there, some NFL experience, some college experience that the players seem to gravitate to, and they've rallied around. And the team from now to 12 months ago, they look different at least. So whatever it is they're doing with the dietitian, the nutritionist, the strength and conditioning, all that stuff has improved. The question now is it going to translate into wins and losses? And, we'll get a pretty good glimpse into the future on Saturday. So, Miami's I think, like you said, preseason 18, 19, somewhere around there. Las Vegas has their over-under win total at anywhere from 8.5 to 9.5, depending on where you look. Florida, on the other hand, who's at home, 3-point underdog, their win total is anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5. So, I mean, on paper, the experts, the pundits, the people in Vegas, they expect Miami to win the game. So while I believe there's a lot of pressure under Coach Napier and Florida, just because the way the season ended last year, you don't want to bookend last year losing to Florida State, another in-state arch rival, and then open the next year losing to another in-state arch rival, and this time at home being Miami. So while I believe there is a lot of pressure for them to win the game, Miami's expected to win the game. So, and I think and John Garcia and I have a fact or fiction coming out later today about, is this game more important for Florida or is it more important to Miami? And the truth of the matter is, I think it's equally important to both sides. It just depends on who you speak to. If you talk to the Florida fans, they're going to tell you it's more important for them. The Miami people are going to say it's more important to them. So I really think it's like flipping a coin as far as that goes.
Funny you say that. I joined John Garcia on that fact or fiction as well, and I'm sure you said Florida has more to gain from this game, and I obviously said that Miami needs the game a lot more, just because every year this is what we go through, Jason. We go through that Miami is quote unquote back, or is at least on the way back, and for the past few years they've been utterly disappointing on the field as far as Miami standards concerns, because most Hurricanes fans are still living in the early 2000s and the late 80s and early 90s when they were dominating college football. And since they do not live up to that standard, then, Miami fans don't feel like the Hurricanes are officially back. But when you look at these coaches, Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal, both of them have a lot of pressure to produce a win in this game. And what I'm afraid of for Miami Hurricanes fans is that if they lose this game, that, all hope is now thrown out the window of the 8 to 9 wins, like you mentioned. So when you look at these two coaches, I mean, they've both been at their respective schools for a little while now, but this is a huge game for a lot of reasons here. Which coach do you think really has more pressure to produce a win on Saturday?
Believe it or not, I actually went with Miami because of some of the reasons that I talked about earlier. If I just try to take the emotional aspect out of the game and just look at it on paper and say, okay, Las Vegas tells me that Miami's a 2.5 to 3-point favorite. Las Vegas tells me that Miami's under. This is 4.5, and they're an underdog at home, a place in the swamp where, people feared coming, when Urban was there or Spurrier was there or whatever, and times have really changed now. So, on a neutral field, I mean, people probably don't want to hear this, but on a neutral field, if Miami's a 3-point favorite in the swamp, they're probably 6.5, 7-point favorite at a neutral field. So just for the sheer fact that Miami is favored to win the game, and I'm a big believer in the numbers and what Vegas tells me, they're spot on a lot of times. That's why it's $1 billion industry. I believe you can't go into Florida, the team that's had 2 losing seasons in a row. They're predicting a 3rd losing season in a row. You can't go in there if you're Miami and you're back and you're favored. You can't come out of there with a loss. So I actually believe there's more pressure on Miami to win the game, even though they're on the road.
I 100% agree. I think Miami's under a lot of pressure, even though it is on the road in the swamp, tough place to play, first game of the season. A lot of new players on this team. I looked, back a couple of years, and a lot of these players that were on this team a couple of years ago are not on the team now. You got a new quarterback, new running back. You got new wide receivers and a bunch of new defensive linemen. But with all that being said, when you look at the talent on this Miami roster, you got to think that Miami will pull out a win just because of the talent alone. It's all about can they handle the pressure of the Swamp? Can they handle that environment? I mean, you said the Swamp was a tough place to play. I found that a little interesting that you said that. I still feel like it is,
Well,
right?
I still think, I mean, I was there for a couple games last year. It certainly didn't feel like, what it felt like in the heyday when, Tebow and, Danny Werfel were there, guys like that.
Sure.
It's certainly it's not an easy place to come into and play. The fact that it is the home opener will probably mean that on 3:30 on Saturday, 3:35, 3:40, the loudness that Miami is going to deal with, that'll probably be the loudest that stadium's going to be the entire season. I mean, the fan base right now is at an all-time high. They're in a big-time frenzy for this game. Plus, the recruiting battles. I think, maybe Fitzgerald might show up. Hanks is going to be there. I mean, it has repercussions beyond just actual wins and losses. It's 365 days of bragging rights when you go out in the May evaluation period and you do in-home visits where you can say, I mean, look what we did to those guys, So it's a really big deal. It's not an easy place to play. They're going to be wound up. They're going to be going crazy. And, there's 53 first-year players on the Florida roster right now. 53 first-year players. Now, some of those guys are redshirt juniors and redshirt seniors. They wanted to bring in some experience and get older in the back end and on the lines, and they've done that. But the fact remains, there's 53 new players on this roster that we haven't seen suit up for Florida and play an actual game. So while the anticipation is through the roof, especially, given this time of the year for not only Florida, but for Miami, there's a lot of question marks. People want to know, what are the wide receivers going to look like? Chimere D. rapport with Graham Mertz. You have Elijah Badger out from Arizona. These are new guys. We've never seen these guys play. We've heard rave reviews about them, but we still need to see it with our own eyes. So, Eugene Wilson he's Eugene Wilson. He's going to be a problem no matter who Florida's playing. So it's the fourth and fifth guy. Is it Andy Jean? Can he get healthy? Aiden Mizell's put on some weight. He can stretch the defense over the top. There's a lot of question marks on both sides of the ball. And, I, for one, am extremely excited just to see the game, as we talked yesterday. So then finally, all the members, we all have something to talk about. We all have something that we can now discuss and say, hey, I just watched 4 quarters of Florida football. Here's what I think. So up until this point, it's, innuendo and it's, speculation and he said, she said. So all that's over on Saturday, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm certainly looking forward to it as well. And you mentioned Graham Mertz, the quarterback, obviously, for the Florida Gators. I think there's a lot of questions kind of surrounding him and his play. When I watched him, Jason, I kind of felt like he maybe held the ball a little bit too long and was maybe indecisive. He's super athletic and can make plays. I mean, this is a kid that I've been watching since high school. I've seen him at Wisconsin. I saw him ball out at the All-American game. And so he's got the talent. Is this the year that he kind of puts it all together? And just kind of what progress have you kind of seen or heard surrounding Graham Mertz?
I think everybody assumed fifth-year senior, or fifth-year senior, left Wisconsin, came to Florida. The thing, and at the time, a lot of Florida fans were kind of surprised that it ended up being Graham Mertz. We were hearing, a lot of other names that were looking at Florida that Florida was talking to, and then all of a sudden the Graham Mertz deal, it leaked out a little bit, and when it happened fast. They were blown away by just his savviness and his football IQ, his ability to diagram and read plays and understand what defenses were doing. His mental grasp of offense and defense just blew Florida away. And that's why they ended up having him, be their guy. And I think, myself included, everyone thought he was going to come in and, he was going to do all this stuff, but it was his first year in a new offense. It was a totally different system. The lingo was different. The plays were different. Everything was different. The personnel was different. And it took some time. So, and I think a lot of people just assumed he was going to hit the ground running because he had been a 3-year starter at Wisconsin and had all these accolades at the Army game where he threw 4 or 5 touchdowns or whatever it was. And, this year I specifically asked those questions to some people within the program, and they expect him to take a big step forward from year 1 to year 2. So that's another kind of thing that I have, bookmarked or earmarked to watch on Saturday. Last year it seemed to be, Florida's always going to want to run the ball. The team that runs the ball the best usually wins. So that's not taking anything away from them. That's what everybody wants to do. But a lot of times last year, it seemed like we saw the little quick outs down the line of scrimmage, kind of east-west passing game versus more vertical, stretching the seam routes and kind of going deep down the field just over the top. We didn't necessarily see a lot of that. And I think that's kind of the number one question that from Florida side of things, from the fan base's perspective, is, are they going to be able to stretch the field vertically? Do they have guys that can beat one-on-one press coverage over the top and stretch the defense? So, I think even Eugene Wilson, they didn't really use him in that way. They just tried to get him the ball as fast as they could because the guy's electric in space. So he just needs touches. But, I'll be curious to see how they use Aiden Mizell or Caleb Relos, a new tight end, or, Arliss Boardingham, Hayden Hansen, some of these guys. So that's just another aspect of, one of the things that I have written down that I'm looking forward to seeing on Saturday.
I guess my question is will that offensive line hold up against this Miami defensive front? Because yesterday, defensive coordinator Lance Guidry mentioned that the strength of this defense is indeed the defensive front. I mean, I think Miami can go legitimately 8-9 deep on this defensive line, just with all the transfers that they brought in and the talent that they kind of already had with Akeem Mesidor should be returning fully from injury. And of course, the freshman sensation in Ruben Bain. You added Tyler Barron, you added Simeon Barrow, CJ Clark transfer, Marley Cook a transfer. I mean, this defensive line is absolutely loaded. You got 3 young five-star freshmen that are also added to the mix as well, with Armando Blunt, Marquise Lightfoot, and Justin Scott. How do you think this offensive line will kind of hold up, and how do you think Graham Mertz will kind of handle that pressure that he'll probably see a lot of on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'm actually glad that you mentioned that the strength of Miami's team is the defensive line in their front. As far as the freshmen go, I'll be curious to see how much the freshmen play. I used to work with Jeff Van Note, legendary Kentucky offensive lineman, with the Atlanta Falcons for years. Totally respect that guy. And he used to always tell me, the closer you play to the ball, the harder it is to play as a freshman. So I'll be curious to see if the freshmen actually get in the game, or, how many snaps or reps they get. On Florida's side of things, a big question mark, surrounding the team the last couple of years has been the offensive line play. Maybe they've been a little bit, subpar. They haven't really been where they've wanted them to be. And of the 53 new players that I mentioned on the roster this season that are first-year players, 19 of them are a combination of the offensive line and defensive line. Wow. So, again, no one's allowed to be at the scrimmages. No one's allowed to be at the practices. So it's all secondhand, okay? But Austin Barber looks like he's going to lock down left tackle. He had a good season last year. A lot of people don't know that he played with 3 significant injuries all year. So, he's healthy. Next to him, you're familiar with Najee Harris. He's playing really good. He looks like he'll lock down left guard. Jake Slaughter's added on a lot of weight. He got a lot of experience last year. Maybe he got pushed around a little bit. He wasn't big enough or strong enough. They've rectified and taken care of all that stuff. And then right guard, we'll probably see, either Cameron Waits, who's 6'8", 340, or Damian George, who's 6'7", 335, that played right tackle out of position last year, slide back inside that's where he naturally plays. And then Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, a transfer who's a fifth-year senior, looks like he'll be the right tackle. So they have options. They have a transfer from Arkansas, Devin Manuel, that I expect to spell Barber and get some reps at left tackle also. And not because Barber's injured, just because Manuel's really good. And I think for the first time in a long time, they have like 8 or 9 guys on the offensive line that they actually really trust and have a lot of faith in. And the only way to see who does what is to, get him in the game live fire when the bullets are flying. And if the strength of Miami's team is the defensive front, then we're going to find out real quick how improved the offensive line is and how much stronger they actually are. So I think it's a great thing that Florida's opening up with a team that maybe has the best defensive line, outside of a Georgia, that they're going to see all year.
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting to see how the trenches kind of play out here. Mario Cristobal said it's going to be a muddy, bloody battle when it comes to the trenches are concerned. So let's kind of flip over to Miami's offensive line and Florida's defensive line as well. I think Miami's offensive line is pretty solid. It's probably maybe on par as how good they were last season. Miami did lose a Javion Cohen and a Matt Lee, who are, moved on to the NFL. And they do retain some guys like Inez Cooper, of course, the freshman All-American. Francis Mauigoa returns. Jalen Rivers, likely an NFL draft pick for next year. The only real question is probably left guard, which you got a guy named Matt McCoy, who will likely man that position. They are trying out a bunch of guys to really kind of see who's going to be at that left guard position. They bring in a transfer from Indiana in Zach Carpenter to man the center role. But I think this offensive line is still going to be pretty solid from what they did from last season. But on the Florida side of things, just kind of let me know just what are the guys that you expect to kind of make some plays on this defensive front, Florida?
Well, I think first of all, one of the additions that they made that everyone believes is going to have a huge impact on the season was the addition of bringing in a guy like Ron Roberts. He's a fantastic defensive mind. So a lot of people believe he's going to have a lot to do with what the defense looks like this year. They have a lot of new guys. They got Grayson Howard, Pup Howard, from South Carolina. I believe he'll be starting at one position. I think they're going to be solid defensive end. We'll probably see Tyreek Sapp, Justice Boone is back, Jack Pyburn, TJ Searcy, but the guy that's been making a lot of waves, George Gums, the transfer, he's from Chicago. That's a guy to keep an eye on. So, again, another first-year player that, Florida fans don't really know about, but he's been making a lot of waves. So, I think the question mark is really how does Florida's inside guys hold up with, Joey Slackman. He's a new guy who's coming in. He can play inside or outside, but I believe he'll be used inside. Des Watson apparently has been, Big Des, he's not in there for many plays, but when he is in there, he's a handful at 450 pounds. So really for me, it's Cam Jackson and Caleb Banks. How good are these guys going to be? This is their free agency year, so to speak. So this is usually when we see guys turn it up. So I'm going to be watching a lot of the inside guys and the action going there. But I think guys like TJ Searcy and George Gums, those are guys you want to figure out what number they're wearing, because I believe those guys they'll have success getting to the quarterback.
Awesome. We'll see if they indeed get to Cam Ward. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention his name at all. I'm pretty sure the Gator defense is going to be totally focused on trying to shut down the transfer quarterback from Washington State. Absolutely dynamic playmaker, can make plays with his legs, can improvise, and just can throw dots all over the field from what we saw here in the spring game and the little bit of time that we do see from practice in fall camp and also in spring. What are some of the defenders on this Gator defense that you expect to or might make some plays like against Cam Ward to try to shut him down?
Again, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but Florida had a lot of issues in the secondary last year. So what did they do this year? They're bringing in 3 redshirt seniors, Troy Bridges, DJ Douglas, Asa Turner. Asa started at Washington. They played in the national championship game. So they're bringing in tons of experience, guys that have played 3, 4, 5 years. And again, we haven't seen these guys play together. We've heard a lot of good things about them. So again, the secondary is probably going to be Jordan Castell's still there. Jason Marshall's he had a great offseason. Devin Moore, if he stays healthy, they're really good at corner with Marshall and Moore. Safety last year, it's hard to play as a true freshman in the SEC or the ACC if you're the free safety. There's so much going on, man. And people, they were really on Jordan last year because he had some games or some plays where he was out of position or didn't look good. But talking to some of those defensive guys, they're like, that's what happens when you throw a freshman out there and you don't have guys ahead of him that can play. Now he's got experience. Now he knows what he's doing. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster. And now coupled with, 3 redshirt seniors that also know what they're doing. I mean, they expect the secondary to be pretty good. And I think Coach Harris has done a tremendous job with those guys. So, outside of the running back group, which I've just been singing their praise all year, they're probably running backs are number 1 for me for the overall most improved unit on the team. Right behind them in a close second, I think overall is going to be the DBs. They got Cormani McClain. He's not going to play. Sharif Denson, Jakeem Jackson, he's going to be out there. These are all guys that I'm sure Miami wanted and recruited. These guys are dogs, man. These guys can play. So, competition breeds excellence. And for the first time in a long time, Florida has competition at every single position, and they have a lot of depth. Again, what we don't know is, okay, how is that depth and competition? How hard is it making those other guys work? And at the end of the day, is it going to translate into wins? So, we're going to find out on Saturday, but I think there's a lot of things to be excited about. George Gums, nobody thought heading into this year, man, George Gums is a dude. That's somebody we got to keep an eye on. Now I'm seeing guys tell me, hey, man, this guy might be our sleeper pick player of the year or newcomer of the year, if you're a Florida Gator fan. So there's quite a few guys that kind of fit into that category if you're a Florida fan. So I think it's exciting just to be able to see new guys, fresh players, new numbers, and see what kind of energy and excitement they can bring into the program. So it's going to be exciting to watch it all unfold on Saturday.
It certainly is, which is a perfect transition to my next question, Jason. How does Florida win this game? Obviously they have the home field advantage, so they have that going for them. So the obvious is like to get turnovers, run the football, stop the run. Those are kind of like, football 101, I guess, things to win a football game. But when you kind of picture this game in your mind and you're like, okay, well, how do the Florida Gators beat the Miami Hurricanes? What say you?
I think, it's cliche. You mentioned a lot of those things. I could say, hey, just score more points,
right?
Win the game. But, I think for Florida, they believe so much in what they're doing now, and these players have bought in so much. I think it's important for them to be able to kind of corral Cam Ward, keep him in the pocket, force him to make plays under duress, number one. They can't let him get comfortable. And I think they obviously have to stay away from giving up the big play over the top, which they were prone to last year. They need to really keep the fans in the stadium engaged in the game. Have something good and have something positive happen for you, whether it's a big run from Montrell Johnson or, Trey Webb or my freshman breakout player of the year on offense is going to be Jaden Ball. Maybe Florida fans get a good look at him and they got to be sound on special teams. They weren't very sound on special teams last year. They had quite a few, issues or blunders that ended up costing them games, namely the Arkansas game. Something happened in the Utah game that really hurt them. So they need to play a clean game of football, stay away from the big plays. And, I think they need to win the time of possession. And obviously, if you win the turnover battle and you're at home, you probably are going to have a pretty good chance to win the game. And I still do believe, because of the strength being, 3-4 running backs, they're going to try to impose their will. They're going to try to run the ball. That's who they are at the end of the day. It could be 60-40 run pass ratio, if I had to guess. It all depends on how the game is going. I mean, do they fall behind? They're down 10 after the first quarter. Now all of a sudden Mertz is throwing 42 times a game. It's extremely accurate. I've no problems if he drops back or throws 35, 40 times. So I just think they got to control the clock. They got to run the ball, corral Cam Ward, stay away from turnovers, and play sound special teams. Get off to a good start. Like I said, they can't have people sitting on their hands 5 minutes into the game because Miami just went 75 yards in 3 plays and it's 7-0. And now everyone in the stadium goes, holy cow, here we go again, so to speak, right? So the players are so bought in, they're so dialed in, they're so focused. They believe they're going to turn things around. They need to see good things happen for them early in this game and throughout this game. So, the crazy thing about what we're talking about here is it's a must win for both sides, right?
Yeah.
Well, these two teams are playing on Saturday. Someone is going to lose this game.
Yeah.
And neither side says it's going to be them. But we know the fact remains, unless they can end up in a tie, which the last time I checked, they can't, someone's walking out of there with a loss. So, I did a story last week telling people, listen, I understand what you guys are saying. The world's coming to an end if Florida doesn't win this game. We talked yesterday. You mentioned that, the Miami fans are going to feel like it was all hype. It was all crap. We're not back. We lost to a team that's had 2 losing seasons in a row. How the hell are we back, right?
Exactly.
I have a hard time believing that you can define the entire football season based around one game. As bad as it will be for Miami fans or as bad as it will be for Florida fans, if they lose this game, what if they go win the next 6 in a row? And all of a sudden you show up to game 8 and you're 6-1. Nobody's thinking about the opener. Is it going to sting? Is it going to hurt? Sure it is. But I don't think one game defines the entire season. On the flip side of that, Miami fans are going to say, man, if we can't go beat Florida, how are we going to beat these other teams? Florida fans are going to say, nobody wants to give either side any respect at all. Florida fans are going to say, man, if we can't beat Miami at home, how are we going to compete with Ole Miss and Texas and LSU and Georgia and all these teams? So I get the other side of the argument, but someone's going to lose on Saturday.
Yeah, someone is definitely going to lose on Saturday. And for me, just for Miami, if I would ask the question that I asked you, how does Miami win this game? It's very similar to kind of what you said. I think Miami just has to kind of get through that first quarter without any major mistakes or turnovers or any major blunders. You don't want to see any missed field goals, major penalties, that type of thing. I think if they can just kind of get through just the environment that is the swamp, then I think they can, just kind of put some plays together, put some drives together to kind of, eventually score more points than the Gators. I know Miami is going to try to control the line of scrimmage. Any Cristobal team has that as the basically focus of the football team. And Coach Dawson, the offensive coordinator, said yesterday that they are going to try to run the football. So I think if they are able to do that, then this kind of opens up everything for Miami. So if they can, get 4 or 5 yards in those first and second down type of plays, I think that kind of opens up everything. If they can't, then they're going to have to be a little bit, of course, more creative and kind of, use some motion, maybe run some screens or some draws, that type of thing to kind of loosen this defense up, especially a defense that will be playing with its hair on fire in the swamp. So I think that is kind of the key for this team. And I think if they can just kind of keep it close or keep it, where they're not down 10, 14 going into the second half, then I think Miami has a great chance to come out of the swamp with a victory because, I think just overall they have more talent than the Gators, just due to the transfers and that defensive line. If they can somehow get a lead on the Gators and force Graham Mertz to throw the ball, like you said, 40 times a game, then I like Miami's chances with their pass rush. I just don't see them sustaining that type of protection for the entirety of this game. And I think that is truly kind of the key to this game. They have to just kind of get through that first quarter, get through that first half without being down a huge margin, without being, committing too many turnovers here. I think they should be in a really good spot to win this game. So lastly, before we get out of here, man, unless you had something to say, you had something to counter with that?
Skill position wise, who are some of the guys for Florida fans that they need to keep an eye on? I mean, like wide receivers, running backs, like who are the guys that Miami fans or you were expecting, hey, man, relatively new player, this guy could Saturday show out, have a breakout game, or even defensively, a linebacker, corner. Who are the guys Florida fans need to focus on and kind of pay attention to on each side of the ball if you picked one or two guys?
Yeah, on offense, I love Damian Martinez. I think the running back is really explosive. He can run through you. He can run around you. He can catch the ball really well. I think he's going to be a really dynamic player along with Cam Ward, obviously. I think if they use the tight end like they should, whether it be Elijah Arroyo, who is back from injury, I think he can be a really big difference maker for the Hurricanes, along with Elijah Lofton if he's a freshman, but I think he can be used in a variety of different ways. I think those two guys are really going to make an impact as far as on offense. The receivers are the receivers. I think everybody kind of knows who Xavier Restrepo is, a solid slot receiver that you can get in the entire country. And then there's a bunch of other kind of unknowns as far as receivers is concerned when it comes to Isaiah Horton and Sam Brown, as far as the transfer from Houston. We have yet to kind of see what he'll do with this offense or in this offense, but I think they can be difference makers. But I think Damian Martinez and Elijah Arroyo are probably the main guys on offense that will make some noise on Saturday. On defense, I think it's you can just kind of go up and down that defensive line. I think Tyler Barron, the transfer from Tennessee, is going to make an impact. I obviously think Ruben Bain is going to be a factor as well, coming off the edge. And I think Elijah Alston as well, the transfer from Marshall. I think a lot of people are kind of not talking about him as much. But when you look at his Pro Football Focus numbers, they're off the charts. And I think he, along with a lot of other guys on that defensive line, I think are going to make a significant impact there. Now, the question that I think everyone has with this Miami defense is the secondary. You have a solid corner in Daryl Porter, who I think will probably be matched up with Wilson for the entire game. But the other corner is kind of a question: who's going to be there? Who is going to play at nickel? I think they're very solid at safety with the transfer from Washington, Mish Powell. He brings a lot of experience. He played in the semifinal of the of the college football playoff last year. From what I hear, he has kind of stepped in as the leader of that defense. Really smart player, a great player to kind of replace Cameron Kinchens from last season, who was the obvious leader of that back end. And then you got Jaden Harris, who needs to step up, just like Lance Guidry, the defensive coordinator, said yesterday. He needs to step up at safety. So at linebacker, I think Kiko Manoa is going to make a case of one of the best middle linebackers in the entire country. He's a sideline to sideline type of backer, really smart, stops the run very well. So if you ask me, the most feared player on this defensive side of the football, I think it is on that defensive line, because they're going to be coming, Jason. I mean, these guys are going to be they're going to be playing with their heads on fire. Ruben Bain was getting double teams towards the end of that last season, but with all these guys, you're not going to be able to double team him, just because you got a guy like Hakeem Mesidor who is ready to kind of step into his his 2022 season where he was just unbelievable coming back from a foot injury. So I think those are kind of the main guys to kind of watch for come Saturday.
So I think we've determined that, in a nutshell, the key to the entire game, Florida's offensive line versus Miami's defensive line. So really,
Yeah.
that's after listening to you talk about that being the strength of their team and how some of their new guys are going to look, the battle up front, probably whoever wins those battles up front probably ends up winning the game and is able to control the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, absolutely. So prediction time, score. How do you think it kind of ends up? 7:30-ish Saturday.
I'm going to go back and I'm going to go with 28-24 Florida, and the power of the swamp and the fans and the crowd is just going to be overwhelming, and it's going to be hard for Cam Ward to communicate. Something good's going to happen for Florida early in the game, and the loud noise will be at an all-time high. And I'm going to go with a close game, 28-24 Florida.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game as well. I think it's going to be a little bit more low scoring than that. So I'm going 23-17 Miami. I think Miami's got a great kicker as well. We didn't talk too much special teams here, but we've got a Luke Rose, contender or watch list guy in Andy Borregales. He's hit big kicks in big moments. I think he is a difference maker as well for Miami come Saturday. So 23-17 Canes.
Well, I appreciate the time, Marcus. It was fun talking, and we'll certainly see how Saturday goes, and hopefully we'll have a great game to watch.
Absolutely. Jason Higdon, once again, joining me from firstand10florida.com, part of the rivals.com network. He was kind enough to join me today for our Scouting the Opponent episode here on the Storm Tracker podcast. Thanks for joining me again, Jason.
Thanks, Marcus.
That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. Also, subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30 and become a member of the rivals.com network. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.